So in this tutorial, we will be going over the render globos. Again, that's called the render globos. Alright, so if we look up here, regardless whether it be rendering, modeling, or any of these, by default you have this up here, and this is your main render menus. We're gonna go over here with this one here, display render settings, where it has this little blue gear and this thing over here. We're gonna click on this icon, render display settings, display render settings. This is your render settings, or what we also call render globals. So the reason why I brought this up is that when we look in our render, if you look closely, we have a lot of this noise. We call this noise, and you got a lot of these little speckles, and it just kind of looks dirty. Okay, we're gonna get rid of that. What we're going, and this is where the render settings come in. You have a couple of tabs. You have the common tab, Arnold Renderer tab, system, AOVs, and diagnostics. For the most part, you're gonna look at Arnold Renderer. That's what we're gonna look at. So the first step in getting rid of all this noise is, what we're gonna do is, first let's save this image. This image is having our lights on as well as our sky dome light. Okay, so what we're gonna do is, you see up here where it says sampling. Okay, sampling. Sampling has to do with the quality and helping to get rid of all this noise. So what we're gonna do is, under the camera AA means anti-alias. So you got all these fancy words like diffuse samples, specular samples, camera AA samples. All you need to know is, first start messing with the camera AA. I recommend setting up 8. It's gonna render update because we have this on. The interactive render is set to on. And look what happens. See how much cleaner it is. Let's look at the before, after. Such a huge difference. Before, after. Much nicer. We could set it higher to 10. 10 will pretty much get rid of everything, but the render times increases. So before, on my computer rendering on the CPU, it was only 1 second. Now it's 10 times that, at 11 seconds per render. But if you set it to say 10, it gets higher. So for example, I'm gonna save this. So this from 1 second to 11 seconds. Now let's set it to 10. Taking a little bit longer. Alright, so that took 18 seconds. I'm gonna save that. So it went from 1 second to 11 seconds to 18 seconds. So from 11 seconds to 18 seconds, it doesn't sound like much, a little less than double. But let's see if you have an animation sequence that is 500 frames or 1,000 frames. You know, 1,000 frames times, let's say 30 seconds per frame. That's a lot of seconds to add up to. It adds up a lot. For example, let me just pull up my calculator. Let's say I have something that's about 1,000 frames, okay, animation, and let's say it takes about 30 seconds per frame when all is said and done. That's 30,000 seconds. Divide that by 60 seconds in a minute, 500 minutes. and divide that by 60 minutes in an hour, that will take you 8 hours to render 1000 frames. So let's say 1000 frames. How many seconds is 1000 frames? So let's divide 1000 frames by 30 frames per second. For half a minute or 33-second animation, which is no, why do I have 30,000? No. Okay, so 33-second animation, that's 1000 frames. Okay, so like I said before, 1000 frames at 30 seconds per frame of render. Okay, so that's 30,000 seconds. 30,000 seconds to render 1000 frames. Okay, and then 30,000 frames divided by 60 seconds per minute gives you 500 minutes. 500 minutes divided by 60 minutes in an hour gives you a little over 8 hours, right? So all said being done, 1000 frames is about 33 seconds. So to do about 33 seconds of animation render, it takes about 8 hours, give or take, depending on the computer. So that's how important render settings are. So let me get rid of that. Now what I can do is let me just put this down to 8. Okay, uncheck that, it's rendering. Then what we're gonna do is I'm gonna hit the escape. So this tutorial is gonna be longer than 7 minutes. So I'm gonna set that to 8. Diffuse. So the sampling is basically the settings to get rid of all the noise. Okay. Our default is set at 2 and 2, which is fine for now. It's fine. The more you crank these up, the longer it takes to render exponentially. The other thing we wanna do is under our ray depth. These are the two main things we're gonna mess with for the most part. Under the ray depth, we see similar words like diffuse and specular. Diffuse, specular. This one is sampling, this one is ray depth. Okay? Using some of the same vocabulary, diffuse and specular, diffuse and specular. And you also have numbers. Whereas ray depth is how many light bounces, how many times the light will bounce. So like I said before, with these global illumination lighting systems, they simulate real world lighting. So like in real life, light bounces off of surfaces. You know, it travels from the sun to our planet, and it will bounce off of the surfaces or go through a surface, which is called refraction. Right, goes through a surface and bounces, whatever. So yeah, so in here we're gonna boost the bounces, how many times it bounces off the surface of our shader. Right now we're set to 1. I'm gonna set it to 2 for the diffuse, 2 for the let's not mess with the specular. Just 2 for the diffuse. Now you'll see that it's going to be a little bit more brighter. And our camera is set to 8. Alright, so that took 13 seconds. So let's compare. This is before at camera settings, anti-alias at 8, and our diffuse at it was at 1. Okay, this was before. It took 11 seconds. Alright, let me get rid of this. It's confusing. So this was 13 seconds, alright, with the camera AA at 8 and our diffuse at 1. Ignore this 2. Our diffuse was at 1. Now our next one is this one. Let me save that. So before, after. After we added a second bounce in our diffuse. Only one bounce for a diffuse, 2 bounces. So basically it lightens our scene up without adding more lights. Before, after. So that's the end of this tutorial. Overall, pull up your render settings, which is over here. Go to your Arnold Renderer. Our default camera anti-alias sampling menu settings was set at 3. Crank it to 8. That's going to increase your render times by about 10 seconds. Then don't mess with this stuff. The other thing you want to mess with is the rate depth, which is how many times the light will bounce off of your surface. The default is set at 1. Diffuse, we're going to set it to 2. You don't need to mess with the specular. It doesn't do much in this situation. So that's the end of this tutorial. Like I said before, a lot of noise. After, cleaned up the noise. After, added a second bounce. That's what that is. And that's the end of this tutorial.